Jason McCartney and North Melbourne teammate Mick Martin travelled to Bali for a week in October 2002. Just 2 days later, McCartney returned to Australia fighting for his life after the bombings that rocked the world. It was a tough time, Jason, wasn't it?
Certainly was, Mike. It's something you don't imagine you'd ever be involved in. You watched the year before, obviously September 11 unfolded, and you're horrified by what you're seeing, but probably deep down inside it's a thought that you think, well, they'll never impact on me or never happen to me. And there it was 13 months later, not only myself but so many other innocent people from all over the world, including a lot of Australians.
Any scarring? And I don't mean physical, I mean emotional scarring?
It's a good question. Strangely enough, there's not. And maybe for me that's the fact that because I was so badly injured, I probably didn't see as much as many others did, that maybe the volunteers and people who were helping others out like myself. And we did a bit of fair bit of work after it too, with some counselling and things. So I feel like I've flushed it out of the system, where I've got a really good position where it doesn't control me now. I have a bit of control of the situation, which was really important.
You were with Mick Martin.
Yep.
You were involved in the rescue mission at Paddy's Bar afterwards. Yet when we realised the extent of your injuries, I mean, how were you able to do that? How were you able to help others when, in your own words, your own skin was melting off you? Well,
I didn't realise at the time, like, we were only in there about 5 minutes, if that. And that flash of the explosion was just, it was blinding. And the sound, it was deafening. It perforated eardrums instantly. But for me, it was the sheer force that I was hit with. And throughout your footy career, playing with Arch and Byron Pickett and Mark Rasciuto, we understand they hit pretty hard, but nothing with like the force I was and many others were hit with that night. So when I picked myself up off the ground, instantly, you know, you think, where's Mick? Because he was standing right next to me. I realised quickly it wasn't Mick, it just wasn't big enough or hairy enough to be Mick. And it happened to be a girl who was in a group behind us, and we were just lucky to have each other. We were both in a bad way, but we were able to help each other try and get that 20 metres to get out of the building. Now, we only got about 2/3 of the way, and I thought it was my clumsiness at the time, but because of the sound of that first explosion, we had perforated eardrums, so we couldn't even hear what was then the massive explosion up the road at the Surrey Club, the car bomb explosion, and that just blasted us back into the building. And then eventually I'm out the front, but I'm alone, so I don't know what happened to everyone else, but I was petrified because I knew I was in a bad way. I didn't know the extent of the injuries though, but all I could think about is I'm looking at this building, it's ablaze and tumbling down, and all I could think about was Mick, and then I had a couple of mates, Peter Hughes and Gary Nash from Perth, and just thinking I'll never ever see them again.
Burns to more than 50% of your body surface, correct?
Yeah.
You literally, I remember interviewing you at the Alfred Hospital.
Yeah, I remember that.
A few weeks after you came home, and you said you looked down and saw your skin melting.
Yeah, I did. It's, I think at the time, I probably could only describe it as like wax from a candle. It was, look, as bad as it was, you also couldn't see the extent because of just all the soot and the black all over your body. So, yeah, it was in a bad way, but I was so lucky. Like I said, I was out the front alone, but then Mick did appear through that smoke and rubble, and it's so random. Instantly I was able to recognise, thankfully Mick hadn't sustained the extent of the physical injuries I had, and his leadership and direction at that point in time is a big reason why I'm still here today. He couldn't hear too well either, but he dragged me up the road out of harm's way, and he tried to get me in a vehicle, which wasn't going to happen because it's very narrow streets around there at the best of times, but after what had happened it was just chaos. But strangely enough, he chucked me on the back of a motorbike with a Balinese motorcyclist and got me back to the hotel where we were staying. We didn't even think about a hospital. I'd been travelling there for 10 years, didn't know where one was, but we knew there'd be a doctor at the hotel, which was really important.
We are going to talk about your footy career.
Yeah, we'll get there.
But one of the things I'll never forget was when I interviewed you at the hospital, you told me you'd said to Mick, you looked him in the eye and said, "Don't let me die here, mate."
Yeah. Geez, you're bringing back some memories now. No, I did say that.
So you were genuinely fearful that you might have gone there?
Yeah, like not knowing how badly injured I was, and like I said, I didn't see heaps, but I could see enough, and it was the place was a mess. And look, I love Bali and still travel there, but the last thing, I didn't really want to finish my days over in that situation.
I mean, you could be a victim and stay a victim, or you can be a victim and become a survivor, and you've done that, haven't you?
Yeah, it's really important. Like, it's a massive part of mine and our life now, what happened, and I can never change that, but it feels like I'm very fortunate I've got a second chance, and you want to be able to live your life, so I don't want to be restricted, but I do understand that these things can happen.
Do you harbour any grudges?
No, I don't. And I don't know why. There's some things I don't know why I haven't got the mental scars, to be honest. I've talked a little bit about being able to speak about it and maybe not see as much. I just don't let it drag me back for some reason. And maybe it was really important in the early days in my recovery process because although it wasn't looking great, I needed a lot of positivity around me. So I've never really allowed myself to look back too much. I've had to go over and give evidence in the trial against one of the perpetrators, being Amrosi, and it was a really difficult day for myself and Peter Hughes, another young guy from Tasmania at the time, being the first Australians to ever give evidence in a trial against terrorism.
And you're in the same courtroom?
Yeah, we were. And
can you remember the feelings then? I suspect there's contempt and anger and all those emotions?
Everything. It was bubbling away. And I think for me, we'd all seen on the news or in the papers, these guys were pretty happy with what they'd undertaken. And for me that day, I was just tried to borrow my old mate Glenn Archer, his mad stare, and have a good look at this bloke that day in courtroom. I was very nervous, there's no doubt about it. But going in there, you tried to be strong and brave and look him in the eye, but he wouldn't even look. And the most difficult thing I found that day is, talking in footy terms, I had to change the game plan. It was all about him. Then the difficult thing was we were there to give impact statements. So we had to get up and talk about individually how it impacted on us. And I really struggled with that because the courtroom was packed. There was people I knew from Australia. There was people from all over the world, but there was people that I didn't know. And I'd got to meet some of those over the couple of days in the lead up to the trial. And I struggled because they're there, because unfortunately they'd lost loved ones. And it was hard because you had to talk about you and you just realise, I'm fortunate. Although it's been bad, I'm fortunate. I can't even comprehend what these guys are going through. 2
to 3 weeks in hospital, you're finally allowed on your feet.
Yeah.
Do you remember what that was like, how it felt?
Yeah, it was quite remarkable. I remember getting told by the specialists, they told me a couple of things. First thing was you pulled through the worst. Well, thank goodness for that. Then they spoke about our wedding was booked for December 14 of that year. Got to postpone that. These injuries, you'll need 8 to 10 weeks in hospital. And then they mentioned about the footy. At that level, highly unlikely with these injuries. But, I was still hopeful. It was just hope. And I got myself out actually in 3.5 weeks, which was really important. And I do remember being outside for the first time and taking those first steps outside, and it was like a newborn foal. It was like I think I lost 10 or 11 kilos. Yeah. So I just wasted away, and the weakness in my legs was I could only jog, walk probably 50 metres, and that was it. And I knew I had a lot of work to do then, that's for sure.
You were 100 to 1, I reckon, to ever seriously contemplate getting back on an AFL ground.
Yep.
The following season you did. North played Richmond. You started on the bench and the fairy tale evolved from there. I mean, that must be a really fond memory for you.
Yeah, it is. And it was. Look, I talk a lot about it to people, and it was a dream to get back and play, and I put some things in place, and I suppose the pivotal moment for me when I knew I could actually play again.
There you are, mate, in triumph.
Yeah, some great memories there, that's for sure. But probably it was my 29th birthday, and it was March the 14th of that year, 2003, and I actually came back and played. North Melbourne's affiliate at the time, the VFL, was Port Melbourne, and I debuted for Port Melbourne in their reserves.
Really?
And I think we played Northern Bull Ants at the time, and it was at Visy Park, and for me that was a monumental occasion because I wasn't worried about my injuries so much. It was the issue of, can I still do it? Thankfully I could, because it was a pretty low-level game. But from there on, I really was confident that I could get back and play, and I wanted to play more than one game, but it was a process, I suppose, from that time on, to realise and understanding how long I had to go to recover, that ultimately I changed the mind and ended up just being the one game. But it was a very special night, that's for sure.
It must have been. I mean, the emotions must have overflowed that night, did they?
Yeah, they did. And it's funny, like, there's so much, this overwhelming emotion and focus on me, but funnily enough, I was trying to focus just on, we need to win. And look, there was added pressure and expectation. I knew, because we have our team meeting that Friday morning. Us as a leadership group went for another meeting after it, and that's actually when I told the leadership group that win, lose or draw, I'd be finishing. And I remember that meeting, and I quiver in the lip when I get emotional, and then talking to Simo and Lee Colbert after it, and why, and I just can't keep doing it. I just can't. And,
physically or emotionally?
More physically. I realised through some visits back for medical checkups that I probably still had a couple of years of healing to go, and I was at a good level, but I just didn't know what the implications could be long term. And footy had been my life, continues to be so in another capacity, but I nearly lost it all, so I had to start thinking more about other people and your health in particular, but also your family.
The game, I mean, the whole of Australia, I can't speak for the northern states probably, but I can't remember a focus on one individual like there was that night. It was on telly, huge audience, and you had the dream result, and you took the mark and kicked the goal.
Yeah.
I mean, that was on Andrew Callaway, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And look, to be honest, it's a little... I think of it all and how amazing it was, but all that focus and attention on me, I was uncomfortable because, I look at my football career and I got there in the end, but I was just an average player that tried to work my way through it and got there.
But this wasn't a footy story.
Yeah, I know, and it became bigger than that, so it was uncomfortable, but and how footy's changed, but to be anxious to get out in the ground and spend the whole first quarter on the interchange and then go out there and give away some free kicks. And look, all I went in at three-quarter time, I hadn't done much. And knowing I had 1 quarter of AFL footy left in me, I was just hoping I was going to see my name still on the whiteboard. And thankfully it was. And I think one of your colleagues here, and David King, early in the last quarter, kicked one forward and just got in front and marked it. And I went back and was pretty anxious, to be honest, because those gloves I wore.
Yeah, the gloves,
Yeah, well, I actually put a new pair on in the warm-up because these were a bit older, and I found that I knew I was going to be playing forward, and I found that I'm a bit sticky. So I was all right to mark, but I was a bit worried about kicking. So I went with the old ones, and thankfully it went through. And obviously later in the game, a fairly ordinary grub kick forward that Lee Harding ran onto, and it got us across the line.
And you won by a kick,
Yeah, won by a kick. And a lot of things about that night, if I look at the last couple of minutes of that game when we hit the front, I played with some wonderful players at the North Melbourne Footy Club. And the efforts of the senior leadership group that knew of my intentions at the end of the game, win, lose or draw to retire, Archer, Stevens, these guys, the way they go at it was just phenomenal every week. But it was like in those last couple of minutes, it was just above and beyond the call of duty. They were remarkable.
So you can will yourself across the line in the right circumstances?
Yes, and we had a really good ability to do that a lot at North Melbourne.
Dean Laidley was the coach that year.
Yep.
Did you think you deserved the game, or do you think that there was some compassion from the coach about giving you the thing you dreamed about?
No, he made me work really hard. When all this happened, I was out of contract, and I didn't know where I sat in the scheme of things at the Kangas.
So 2002 was the last year?
Yeah, Dennis had left the club, and Dennis had been fantastic for me. I'd missed the last couple of games of that year. It was up in the air. Dean's coming in, maybe a new direction at the club, and ironically, it was probably coming down to Mick and I, who stays. Thankfully, Mick got the heave-ho, and I stayed. So, but I know for a fact they thought at first whether I'd survived. I know now they never thought I'd play again, and I think the biggest frustration for me is they couldn't believe that it was going pretty well at VFL level, although it's a lot lower. But it was like, this can't be real. Something's got to go wrong here somewhere. And I understand it from Dean too. First year coach, he's had to deal with, we've had the Carlton game, obviously coaching against Dennis. We've obviously had the game against Adelaide, which Wayne Carey was playing at Adelaide then. So there's been a bit going on in the space of, what are we talking, 10, 11 weeks.
And you were 5-5, so the season's in the balance, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think Richmond at the time too were the other top-ranked Victorian team. So
tell me about the emotion yours and in the rooms beforehand on that Friday night.
Look, I do get emotional, and I just didn't want to get emotional that night. I just didn't want to, because I knew I had a job to do. So I remember running out before I went through the banner and sort of shaking Dad's hand there, and I didn't look at him much, so I was a bit like this. So, look, I had a job to do, and thankfully we got the right result, just.
Let's go back to the start. You're 16.
Yep.
Living in Nil.
Correct.
Everyone knew of you because you're the outstanding junior, mad Essendon supporter.
I was.
A bedroom adorned with all the Essendon paraphernalia. The Pies take you at pick number 4.
Correct.
Did you know where you were headed, or had they shown any interest in you?
Collingwood was probably the only club that I hadn't had any discussions with, so it was shock horror. Geelong had the first pick, then it was, we have Carlton.
You recognise that kid?
Gee whiz. How quickly it passes you by. Carlton had the second pick, then it was Fitzroy, and the Pies had secured that pick 4 traded Terry Keys to Richmond. So I secured that from Richmond. I probably thought, to be honest, I thought I was going to Carlton at pick 2.
You finished at Collingwood at 20 years of age after 30-odd games.
Yeah.
What went wrong?
Started at Collingwood, 17-year-old debut, played a couple of games. The next year was playing in the reserves, which was such a strong, tough brand of footy. Then the blokes you were playing against were really seasoned AFL campaigners. And Craig Kelly, unfortunately, did his knee, and I was slotted in at centre-half back for the second half of the season, so 92, and really felt like I belonged there and was going quite well. And 93 came along and had some hamstring troubles at the beginning of the year. And we were playing North Melbourne in a practice match at Arden Street, and I was desperate to play, and I'd had some hamstring soreness and training that week, ripped the hamstring, and it carried on for the whole year. I had issues. I probably saw that my opportunities may be limited there, and I was looking for greener pastures, and I thought Adelaide had showed some interest, so I pursued that.
So you go to Adelaide.
Yeah.
Was it a successful venture, do you think, going to Adelaide?
It was an interesting period for me because I thought, there's the boys.
Some good names there.
Certainly is. Pick the odd one out. It was interesting. Robert Shaw had just been installed as coach, and I had a good relationship with Shaw, and I think maybe it was off the back of couple of boys. Most of the players at the time then at the Crows were South Australian boys. There wasn't too many interstate boys there. Sure, probably that defensive mindset that helped me, and I played a fair bit of footy the first 2 years under Shorey, apart from a couple of suspensions, but unfortunately we just weren't functioning as a team, and it was a disappointing couple of years. And then Malcolm Blight came in 97, and the place was up and about. He made some changes. I think I played the first 6 games under Blighty, and then I didn't get a look in again after that.
Then you end up at North in 1998.
Yes.
How did you get there?
Look, at that point in time, I thought I was done and dusted. I'd 7 years in the system, only 75 games, so it hadn't been a great return. But there was a guy by the name of Dennis Pagan, who I'd only really met once through the Teal Cup days. He was coaching Metro. I'd heard that Dennis had showed a little bit of interest during the year. Obviously, they won 96, the Kangaroos. Ian Fairley, centre-half back, retires after that. I think even Johnny Longmire had filled in a bit at centre-half back in 97. So he saw a position there that he wanted to fill, and he believed in me, and he came over to my place. Adelaide had an interest in Mark Stevens at the time. Mm-hmm. Steve-O wasn't getting a look in as a forward at North Melbourne for the obvious reasons with Duck up there.
Yep.
Dennis spoke to me. I remember he came to my place at West Lakes. I didn't know how it was going to pan out, and he had an A4 sheet of paper, and he had on it just all these things that is good about Jason McCartney. And I'd lost a lot of belief because here I am at the Crows, Blighty the Messiah, the great coach. I'd only played the 6 games. I'm really doubting myself. I was at a pretty low level then in self-belief and confidence. And Collingwood and Adelaide was a terrific time and great clubs. But the expectation was always on me there. The first draft pick, the Pies have just won the premiership. The Great White Hope, I remember reading an article, I think it was Michelangelo Rucci there when I arrived at Adelaide. But at North Melbourne, I was a nobody and I loved it. And I don't think anyone expected me in the outside world to actually succeed there. And the focus was on Wayne and Corey and Arch and Steve-O and Kingy, all these other guys, so I could just play a role, which was great.
One of your good games was the 1999 preliminary final.
Yeah.
You played well and you had a mental lapse.
Certainly did.
Now, this is a suspension that cost you the dream, every kid's dream, wasn't it? You missed the grand final under suspension.
I did.
Do you remember what happened, what led to that incident with... It was you and Clark Keating, wasn't it?
Yes, I won't forget it. It was late in the last quarter. We're on top. And I'll never forget Mick. Mick was such a great player, but Mick Martin, he would make sure he looked after his man, and that was it. And he did it very well.
I've heard that before.
He did it very well, but I covered for Mick, which I never did again after that. But covering for Mick and, look, playing under Dennis, you knew you had to be physical. And I knew I was going to be late on the spoil, and I knew I had to make contact. And
so Keating's one out.
Keating's one out, yeah. He's about to mark. I had been suspended a couple of times. Playing on bigger opponents, I had a bad habit of a round arm spoiling technique, which got me in strife, and did this day. Now, I was calculating in the split seconds that I'll make body contact, I'll whack him in the top of the shoulder. He didn't land on his feet. He actually went lower.
Yeah.
So the top of the shoulder became the bridge of the nose, and Darren Goldspink was right there. I went in the book, and I just knew, and as Clark ran off the ground, when he took that the white towel away from his nose, I don't think it helped me. And unfortunately, I'd had some pride. So I got 4 weeks. There's only 1 week that mattered. And oddly enough, you miss the grand final, you miss the premiership. But the next year, I was still playing. I was able to serve that other 3 weeks in the NAB Challenge series. So I'm still playing practice matches. So I only missed 1 game, and gee, that was the premiership.
When did the emotional impact hit?
And funnily enough, it was a numb week. Like when I fronted up to training, I had to be upbeat. I had a pretty good week on the track, ironically. I had to be upbeat because I just knew I couldn't bring the other boys down. When I was home, I was terrible. But probably, Mike, to be honest, it really hit me what I was missing out on at about 4:45 or 5 o'clock on the Saturday. And that was before I'd even been to the tribunal, because that's when Carlton beat Essendon by a point. And that's when I knew that not only was I going to miss out in the grand final, it was going to be a premiership.
So you knew when Carlton knocked the big danger out that North could get Carlton.
Yeah, and just the emotion around that win, because they were the rank outsiders that day, and to do it, you just knew they're not going to be able to get up again.
Are you over that? Are you over the... I mean, your life, the perspective in your life's changed a bit.
Well, that's the thing. At the time, that day, standing up all day in the race, and you get out there and you rap for the boys, and the well wishes is amazing. And I'd seen Johnny Longmire obviously playing one then, and he missed out in 98. He wasn't selected, and he got that chance, and he retired after that. And people, you get another opportunity, you're part of it. But you knew 24 games is great, but you knew there's no medallion. You're out there in your suit. The boys have, the blood, sweat, and tears on the day. And I saw the show with Moon's replacement.
Yep.
And the weeks and months that followed, I was really struggling. But I suppose it was all put in perspective when the Bali stuff 3 years later occurs. And I suppose the other thing, I didn't want to let it impact on me until it's the one that got away, isn't it? I didn't want to allow it to impact on me.
Does that hurt when you?
Oh yeah, look, I was quite emotional out there that day. Quite emotional.
Does that mean tears?
Yeah, definitely. But I probably thought I had a few years ahead of me, and we had a good side. I didn't want to let that hold me back and wallow in the self-pity and impact on my football. And I strongly believe when I look back, although it was a good year individually in 99 as well as the premiership success, I missed out. 2000 was my best year of AFL footy. But we got beaten in a prelim.
You'll remember, as we all do, the way Dennis addressed Wayne Swass and Glenn Archer.
Thank God we won.
When they were
97 prelim, before my time.
And the vitriol from Dennis then.
Yeah.
What did he say to you after the 1999 prelim when you'd been reported then, and you both knew you were going to miss?
Yeah, he was okay actually.
Was he?
He was really supportive. I remember driving out of the tribunal there, and Walshy and Dennis was on the phone. He was quite supportive. Didn't go off at all. And it was an interesting week that day too, because we had Mick under investigation as well for an incident with a young Simon Black.
I remember it vividly.
And Mick, probably lucky.
You were stiff. I mean, you got probably your right whack, but Mick was very lucky.
Yeah, and I don't think if Mick would have got suspended as well, whether Dennis would have been in that consoling frame of mind with me on the Tuesday or Wednesday or whenever it was. So
going to the footy grand final day, not only is it the event, but you think you can win.
Yeah.
It must be incredibly difficult to maintain your composure and be up.
It was. And it was a 3-year period where year one at the Crows you're not selected.
Yep.
And we win. You play in a losing one and then this one. So it was, you're around the mark. I suppose the only consolation I take is I actually know I was good enough. It was through suspension that cost me. But it's funny as time goes by, when the boys have had their reunion, so what's 10 will come up to a 15-year one, I haven't been.
Deliberately stayed?
No, I haven't been invited because they're the premiership players, and I understand that. So they're probably the things. Because the great thing you take.
I mean, I would have thought you would have been there.
Yeah, no, I missed the 10-year one. I missed it. And they're the things you take away. Like that's the ultimate, obviously, but the friendships are so strong, and they'll forever be there. Like I remember Corey McCartney grabbing me, and he said to me when I got the 4 weeks during the week, he said, "Don't worry, mate. I'll get 2 for you. I'll play that well, make sure we win." And So the support of the players was absolutely amazing, but they had to be so focused as well. They couldn't worry too much about me.
How do you see your footy career? From this kid that had all the publicity attached to him as a teenager, in retrospect now, how do you see it?
It was a struggle through that first period. You come in with this great self-belief and a bit of cockiness and probably a bit of arrogance, but that got eroded over, especially through that Adelaide period. It got knocked around a fair bit, and then was able to rebuild that through the North period, through Dennis. So in the end, look, I walk away and I'm just comfortable that in the end I was able to probably get the best out of myself. But geez, if I would have gave it away after Adelaide, I would have had so many regrets, just the unknown. But Dennis provided me the opportunity, the club embraced me, and I walked away at the end. Although I retired at 29, I'd had 13 years, played with some at really good clubs with great players, and the premiership eluded, but I was comfortable in the end.
Well, you've packed a hell of a lot into your last 25 years, I must say. It's been an amazing journey in football and in life, and I think you're entitled to be very proud of what you've done on the footy field, and you've carried yourself with great aplomb post-Bali. So well done on that, and good luck for the future.
Thanks very much, Mike. Appreciate it. Thank you.
This has been a Fox Footy production for Fox Sports.